growing up in Dakar and living in Dakar is basically, it's probably one of the best places in the world to grow up in, because I mean, even as kids, we got to watch Michael Jackson videos, and then local superstars, and then Indian movies and French pop culture. So it's quite an interesting mix. It's less unusual than you would think, because I think the big African cities have always been quite open to the rest of the world. It's only now that people realize it, with my generation of artists who incorporate all these influences in their creation. But even in the previous generations, I remember my dad would travel to London just to buy one vinyl of the Beatles and come back to Dakar. Can you imagine? The Studio of Vanities is an ongoing project that I will probably never stop. It's a series of artist portraits. Basically, what I'm trying to do is to document the young art scene, well, the cultural scene, and not only those who are on the front line, not only artists, but all those people who make it happen. And they all have this in common, that they're my generation, like born in the early 80s, and they're making it happen sometimes without any institutional support. Mom and dad are not always okay with the choices they made, just like they weren't with my choice. But somehow they're making it happen. They have very big initiatives, and they are the persons who make this art scene in Senegal and West Africa so vibrant. So it's a way for me to preserve and reinvent this tradition of stage portraiture, which is a heritage that we're very proud of. I deliberately choose to give a different image of the Africa I know, because there are as many Africas as the 800 million Africans that you find in this continent. But my Africa is urban. It's very contemporary, but on the other hand, it doesn't shy away from its past. I mean, tradition is as valued as being edgy. You know, it's a shame that the only moments in which people talk about us, when was the last time you heard about Senegal? It was during the Ebola case. And we had one case which we solved. But there are so many other things, positive things that happen year-round. We have great scientists, great artists. The political life is very democratic. I mean, we've never had any mishap. And how come nobody ever talks about it? And how come nobody ever talks about all these young individuals who do great things? That's what the series is about. In West Africa, fabrics play an important role. They tell a lot. When my mother was pregnant, a fabric was made. When I was born, another fabric was made, hand woven. And then later on, at every stage of the life, a fabric is made, and it means something. It tells a lot about who you are and where you are, on which stage you are in your lifetime. There are specific fabrics for weddings, for burials, for births and circumcision, and not many people of my age would be able to read through all this, but I do. I know, when I look at a fabric, I know exactly from which area of the country it is and what it's supposed to mean. Remixing Hollywood is a project that I worked on with another photographer, Antoine Tempé. What we wanted to do is to imagine what the Hollywood movies that we loved would look like if they were shot in Africa. So each of us had 10 movies, and he did Breakfast at Tiffany's in Abidjan, and I did The Matrix in Dakar. And it was a celebration, really, of the magic of a good movie. You know, a good movie takes you away. You don't care if James Bond is black or white, it's James Bond. It was all over the press, worldwide. But then it started a controversy, could you believe it, especially in the US, because some people were claiming that there were two African photographers who wanted to paint Hollywood black. And you should see the comment sections under every article. It was crazy. But then it met a goal. If it hits a nerve, then it found its purpose, because that conversation needs to happen. Project Diaspora is my latest project. I started it while I was in a residency in the south of Spain, in Malaga. I guess I needed to be outside of my comfort zone and be in this whole new setting where I didn't have my people, my models, my friends, my tailors. And so it really gave me the guts to go on the other side of the camera, which I had never done before. This Mediterranean Europe has been the point of contact between Europe and Africa, and it still shows in the lifestyle, in the faces, in the food, in everything. You know, sometimes in Spain you're like, wow, this feels like Africa, because somehow it's been, well, I wouldn't say it's been part of Africa, but it's always been very close. Basically, I wanted to see whether there were representations of Africans and Moors in classical painting, and I came across this Diego Velázquez painting of Juan de Pareja, who was his assistant and whom he freed. The curiosity kept on growing, and I discovered so many other portraits, and I wanted to know who these people were. And I was stunned, because behind every picture there is a great story that I had never heard about, not in Africa, not in Europe. I felt like this needed to be shared with a language that people could relate to nowadays. I also wanted to draw a comparison between those Africans from the 16th and 19th century and the current soccer royalty, because I think there are some similarities when you look at the soccer world and you look at the likes of Samuel Eto'o or Didier Drogba or God knows who. They are acclaimed for what they do, scoring goals, but they're not always respected as, for who they are. Despite the outrage it always produces, people still find it right to throw bananas at African soccer players because they failed to score a goal, or you get racist comments from soccer authorities like, you know, African soccer players, well, they run fast, but they aren't very smart, plus they're cheap, so, you know, you still get to hear these things in 2015. Technically, these could be called self-portraits, but I tend to say that these aren't self-portraits. These are celebrations of a memory. I'm just using myself as a prop, but these aren't my portraits. It's as if I was lending my flesh to these souls so that they can contribute to this current conversation about the role of Africa and Africans in the global civilization. I wanted to bring them back to life and give them an opportunity to talk about the role of Africans outside of Africa.